Okay, so let's dive right in. Today, we're looking at two really powerful and maybe even surprising ideas from a couple of ancient biblical letters, the letter to the Hebrews and the letter of James. And trust me, they both challenge some very common ideas we have about faith. So, let's just start with this question right out of the gate. Can you have too much religion? It feels like a trick question, doesn't it? I mean, you can't have too much God or too much faith, right? But what about religion itself? All our efforts to get it right, all the stuff we do. Well, our first letter suggests that the answer is, surprisingly, yes. And this gets us to what the letter to the Hebrews basically calls the too religious problem. The core idea here is that sometimes our very best, most well-intentioned religious activities can actually get in the way of what God is trying to do. So think of it like this. On one side, you have the pure, simple action of God, which just calls for our faith, our obedience, our worship. But then on the other side, you have us. You have our human tendency to add stuff, to supplement it, to create what the source here calls a fussy religion that ends up just diluting the whole thing. And this tendency leads to a really specific problem that this letter was written to fix. We become what you might call Jesus and Christians. It's this idea that deep down, we feel like Jesus alone isn't quite enough. We get this impatient need to add our own 2 cents worth, to improve on things. Now, this hyphen problem looked a little different back then, of course. For the original audience, the additions were things like angels or Moses or the old priesthood. Today, well, that same issue might look more like Jesus and politics or Jesus and education. The and keeps changing, but the cluttering effect is exactly the same. So if the problem is all these hyphens and all these add-ons, what's the solution? Well, the letter to the Hebrews is pretty direct about it. You can almost picture the entire letter as a giant delete key. It just systematically works its way through all those Jesus and arguments, striking them out one by one to bring the focus right back to where it's supposed to be. And here's the crucial part. The goal of all this deleting isn't just to be a minimalist. It's about freedom. It's about clearing away all the clutter so we can be free for that simple, responsive act of faith, that one human action where we get on the way instead of standing in the way. All right, so let's switch gears to our second letter from James and see how this builds into a picture of what a community should look like. Because James, he flips another common expectation on its head. This time, it's about what a church is actually for. We often think a church should be a model community, right? A showcase of good, moral, perfect behavior. But James presents this starkly different reality. He says it's not a place to hide our flaws. It's the very place where human misbehavior is meant to be brought out into the open and actually dealt with. And the analogy he uses for this is it's incredible. A hospital doesn't exist for healthy people to come and show off how healthy they are. No, it exists to gather the sick and help them get well. In the same way, he says, the church is designed to collect sinners. So the whole point is completely counterintuitive to how we usually think. We're all about presenting our best selves, a perfect image. But James is saying, no, this is a workshop. It's a clinic. It's a place where things are supposed to be messy, because that's the only way they can ever be diagnosed, faced, and ultimately healed. But how do you even manage a community like that? I mean, a place full of misbelief and misbehavior. It takes more than just knowing a bunch of rules or theology. It requires a very specific life skill. And that skill is wisdom. But you have to pay attention to the definition James is using here. Wisdom isn't just about accumulating information, about knowing things. It's an active, practical skill. It's the ability to actually live out the truth in the messiness of real life. I mean, James basically asks this question, and it really cuts right to the heart of it all. You can have all the right beliefs, you can know all the correct facts, but what good is any of that truth if you don't actually know how to live it? So where does this practical life skill kind of wisdom come from? Well, there's this really fascinating piece of church tradition about the author himself, James, that gives us a huge clue. So get this. According to early church history, James had a very particular nickname. People called him Old Camel Knees. Sounds kind of weird, right? But the story behind it is the key to his entire letter. He was called that because he apparently spent so much time on his knees praying that they developed these thick, tough calluses, kind of like a camel's.
His deep wisdom wasn't academic, it was something forged in the discipline of long, determined, constant prayer.
All right, so let's just pull this all together. From Hebrews, we see that too much religion can actually clutter up a simple faith, and the solution is to just start deleting the hyphens. And from James, we get this incredible picture of the church as a hospital for sinners, not a museum for saints, a place that needs real wisdom, the skill of living the truth, which, we learn, is founded on prayer. And that leaves us with one final thought, a question to take with you. The letter to the Hebrews pushed its readers to figure out what their Jesus and additions were. So the question for us is pretty simple. What is the hyphen in your life? What well-intentioned and might just be getting in the way?